Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to my next guest, Shawn Puncochar. We've known each other for over 20 years. We worked together at Banyan Productions on the show A Wedding Story. Shawn has gone on to do amazing things. She's been an EP showrunner for HGTV, DIY, the Travel Channel. She's been director of programming. She is the consummate storyteller. And I am so happy to have her with us today. Shawn, welcome.
Thank you.
Does it seem like it's been, part of it seems like it could be yesterday, and then some of it seems like it was a completely different lifetime?
I wouldn't say it feels like a different lifetime, but it was definitely a great time of life and just one of the most fun working experiences I've ever had.
It really was. And what I find so interesting, and I've spoken with other people that we've worked with at Banyan, we've maintained relationships with many of these people throughout our lives, which speaks to the culture that they had at Banyan. It was very family oriented, and we were a family.
Agreed.
That's hard to find in production, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they made a concerted effort to really promote a lot of togetherness within the company, whether it was, taking everybody out for happy hour or having a party or having a softball team. And so there were a lot of opportunities to get to know people instead of just staying in your silo of whatever your show was.
Let's just roll back a little bit.
Okay.
Because I read in your bio, which I found interesting. I don't think I either didn't remember or we never discussed it, but you said since you were around 8 years old, you sort of got this bug to be a writer and grew up around production because your parents were both in the business.
Mm-hmm.
What was the moment that you really thought, wow, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life?
I would have to say sitting in the back of the edit room. So I used to leave school and I would take the bus to a production house called National over on 42nd and 11th in New York City. And I would sit in the back of the edit room, and it wasn't like now where it's all digital. So it was definitely a lot more intense. And my mom would sit there for 12, 15, 18 hours a day, cutting together a commercial or a TV show. So I think that's probably where my interest was piqued. And then as time went on, I got to have lots of great experiences with my parents. And then when I went to college, interestingly, my dad was not in favor of me going into television. And I said, how come? He's like, I just don't want this life for you. It's so crazy. He's like, I want you to try other things. So I tried political science. No. I tried PR. No. I tried something else. And I was like, I want to get my Bachelor of Arts in journalism. And he was like, fine. So, it's interesting that even though he brought me up in the business, he was a little disappointed when I actually decided to pursue it.
It's interesting that you said that because my father wanted me to go into the business that he had. He was running multiple wholesale and retail health and beauty aid stores. And he built them from scratch. And I helped as a kid, and learned how to build a business from the ground up, which was really a valuable lesson. But I had no interest in going in that industry. And when I told him, and he had been in advertising, all the crazy stories that you hear about advertising, and he had worked for Revlon. He was Charles Revson's right-hand man. And when I told him that I wanted to go into television production or advertising, he had the same reaction. He's like, no, you do not want to do that. This is not the lifestyle I want for you. And I don't know whether as a kid you think, well, I'm going to do it anyway. But certainly we both did head in that direction. You started off in the talk show genre, right?
I actually started off, my first real job was at Ogilvy and Mather in the production department. So I worked on, my biggest account was American Express, but I worked on Playtex, I worked on Pepperidge Farm, I worked on a few other ones, but American Express took the bulk of my time. So like I got to shoot an ad with Stevie Wonder. I got to do a big production with Buster Poindexter. So it was great for a first job out of college. But the amount of time that it took to produce a 30-second commercial was painful. We would shoot it and it wouldn't hit the air for 9 months or a year. And people would come out of the woodwork to give notes on these cuts. And I'm like, who are these people? Like, so that process was too small. So that was when I moved over to talk and got a job as a production assistant on the Maury Povich Show.
That must have been interesting.
I am so glad that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was appalling. It was exciting. It was exhilarating. It was the most grueling job I've ever had, hands down. Again, working like 14, 15, 16-hour days. That was when pagers came out. So they got us pagers, and that pager went off all the time. I remember I almost threw it in the Hudson River once. But I think there were certain parts of talk that I absolutely loved, but there also was a very exploitative aspect to it that I did not like at all. And I did not like taking advantage, what I felt was taking advantage of uneducated, low-income people who were willing to tell these sensational stories on national television. And when I found myself advising people against appearing on the show that either I booked or I didn't go home, I knew there was a problem. So I made my job harder because I didn't want them to do it. You
were talking people out of actually
out of appearing on the show. I liked the drag queen beauty contests, and I liked like the fun stuff, like the crazy animals, but that wasn't the bulk of what we did. The bulk of what we did was just sensationalized, jaw-dropping family secrets and that part. So I only did that for a year, and then I was like, I'm not cut out for this world. And then I believe my next big job was at MTV. So that was more my speed.
So at MTV, were you producing at that point?
I was a production assistant, and then I got promoted to associate producer. So I did some music documentaries, which were awesome. I worked on Spring Break, which
crazy.
That in terms of the most hours worked in a given period of time, absolutely. We would get so delirious because we just would have worked so long and so hard that none of us even knew our names anymore. But it was fun. It was like a great place to be. We were meeting all these like crazy actors, singers, dancers, comedians. Like it was a very cool experience.
And you were still in your early or mid 20s. Like this was early on. So it was great experience to build on. Do you find that over time, you have taken bits and pieces of every job that you've had, even if they were in different genres, and tapped into all of those skills to build into the person that you are today? I mean, even the negative stuff.
Yeah, I think that was one lesson that I remember learning from my dad was he's like, you want a job that's crazy, because when you have a job that's crazy, it means you're wearing multiple hats. And I never really knew what he meant about that until I was immersed in some of these insane jobs. And I was production assistant, I was AP, I was producer, I was booker, I was caster, I was babysitter when I had to watch people at the hotel to make sure they didn't escape off into the streets of New York City, which did happen once. I took them to dentist visits. I Like just the sheer amount of hats I wore. I was in the control room because they were like, we want you in here because, this story best and you know who all the players are. So it was, I do think sometimes the worst, most brutal jobs do give you an experience that you can't duplicate. And also too, when you have absolutely really crappy, awful jobs, every job after that, you can always say, well, it wasn't as bad as Maury Povich, or it wasn't as bad as this job. It's like, it's all relative. So when there's nowhere to go but up when your first few jobs are really crappy and hard.
I did not work in the talk show scene at all like you did. I've done a lot of Dr. Phil shoots and some other talk show background stories and things. And so I have a sense of what you're talking about. But like when you say you took them to the dentist, like you're serious about that. People had no teeth and you had to take them to get teeth. Is that true?
Yes, we are not allowed to put people on the air that were missing teeth. And listen, these people were thrilled. They got to come to New York City for free, which they never thought they would ever do. Right. And they got their toothpicks. Like they were super happy. And that was also a thing where I'm like, well, for some of these people, like this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to them. But I had a special sort of sensitivity towards, these people who would come on and they had teenage kids and they were going to talk about things that I thought, that poor child who's in high school in this small town. So that was where I think my moral compass kind of, there was a certain line I couldn't cross. So, but
it's difficult because you have to separate your emotions from your job.
Yes.
A lot of times with what we do. And that can be difficult. That can be extremely hard when you have such empathy for the person that you're speaking with, or you have an uneasy feeling about what's being discussed. When you left your other jobs with MTV and Maury, how did you decide what your next career move was going to be? Was it deliberate? Did you say, okay, I've got to get out of this world and I want to do X?
Well, I had worked at MTV for a year and a half, but it was a pretty insular community. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And my boyfriend at the time had gotten out of advertising and was going to go to med school. So he moved to Philadelphia to do pre-med at UPenn. And we were long distance for the first year. And then he needed to stay there for a little while longer. So I was like, I'll just move there. I'm ready for a change. And so I knew a couple of people from the Maury Povich show who had gone to Banyan. And that was sort of how I made the leap. So I think they hired me that day. And it was great because it immediately gave me my own community in Philadelphia. Which was really, really special. And I think allowed me to just experience the city in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise.
And also working on a wedding story there were some interesting stories, deep, emotional things that went on. But in general, you're with people for the most exciting time in their lives.
Yes.
Partying all the time. So that's a huge leap. And I know that you had some great experiences working on that show, as I did. And then you went on to be an executive producer for, was it Trading Spaces Family?
Yeah. So I was living out in New Jersey because I had decided I wanted to try news and see if I liked it, because I thought the pace would be great. And I did it for about 8 months. Absolutely loved it, but was like, no, this isn't for me. But again, great experience, absolutely great experience. And I got a call from Banyan, from Ray Murray, and he said, we need someone to launch Trading Spaces Family. And this was the height of the Trading Spaces insanity. And so I took the train out and met with them and they were like, the job's yours if you want it. And I talked to my then husband about it. And I said, well, I have to live in New York because my husband's in residency. Like, I can't move to Philly. And he was like, that's fine. You can work from home a couple days a week. So that was sort of my first venture into working at home. So I was there for almost a year, and then I found out I was pregnant, and the commute got really, really hard. And so I ended up leaving and going and getting a job in New York. But oh my gosh, Banyan's just, what a special place that was, twice over for me.
Yeah. Yeah. After I left, because I had gotten pregnant and thought, okay, I'm going to stay. And then I would live so far away. The commute was just too difficult, but I did go back and freelance as well. And it's just was like a breath of fresh air, you know. One of the things that I have admired you for many years, but one of the things early on when you got pregnant, you went to work for True Entertainment, right?
Yep.
At the time. And I remember visiting you in New York, and you had your daughter, your firstborn, in the playpen in your office. And I was in awe of you at that moment. I thought, how can she possibly have this high-powered job, work all these hours, manage to be a good mommy, and do it all? And over the years, I had actually thought about doing that, you know, with my first kid, and Banyan was really nice. They said, sure, bring the baby, blah, blah, blah. But again, I was commuting an hour and 15 minutes each way. And I thought, I waited all this time. I was like almost 40 when I had my first child. And I said, I waited all this time. I don't want to put him at risk in the car on the turnpike and the Schuylkill Expressway. And so I ended up not doing it, but it always stuck out to me how just passionate you were about your work and being a mom, you know, and how you were able to blend those two things. That's not an easy task at all. How did you juggle that? And how do you continue to juggle? I mean, you're like super mom. You're a superhero, Shawn, in my mind.
I don't know about that. I think, you know, at that time, so I was at Banyan. I had told my husband at the time, this commute is very hard for me. And so he's like, well, what are you going to do? And that day I got a call from True Entertainment, now Truly Original. And Glenda said, can you come in and meet with me? So I met with her on New Year's or Christmas Eve and had a 3-hour meeting with her. And she said, when can you start? And I said, well, I do feel like I need to disclose to you that I'm, 12 weeks pregnant. And she was like, shit, are you serious? And she was like, sorry, congratulations. That's wonderful. And she said, well, what's your plan? And I said, well, I'm actually looking for something in the city because my current job is just too far. And she said, well, how late can you work? So we took out the calendar and we figured out what the production schedule was. And so it would take me right up. I would maybe have to lose a couple of weeks, but she was like, I can grab it at the end if you go into labor, early labor or whatever. So I have to say they hired me pregnant. When it was, I had my daughter, and 10 days later, I got a call from them. We have a show that's in trouble. Can you come back? And I said, if you pay for me to bring a babysitter, I'll come in. And they were like, it's probably going to be a month, but we just need you to save this show for us. So I went to the office every day, took my mother-in-law with me and paid her. And I would be in the edit room and be meeting with the production team and nursing. And then I went back out on maternity leave, and they called me back and they said, we want you to come back. How soon could you come back? And I said, I need to spend some time with my daughter. Like, I need a month. And they said, okay, well, and I said, I don't want to come into the office 5 days a week. They were like, well, but we want to promote you to director of programming. So we would need you in here 5 days a week, but you could bring the baby with you. And I said,
Incredible.
okay. So she came with me for 3 days a week for the first 2 years of her life. And I mean, I did conference calls while nursing. I did conference calls while pumping. If she, on the couple of days that she wasn't there, it was definitely, I felt like I was blazing new trails. And I can't tell you how many women would visit the office. They're like, how did you swing this? And I said, honestly, my bosses are ahead of their time for sure. They never looked at me sideways. I left at 5:00 every day because I wasn't going to screw up her schedule. And I got my job done. And I think I'm thankful that I had a job that I was truly passionate about and I truly loved, because I look back now and I am like, what the actual hell was I thinking? Like, how did I remember she was 2.5 months old and I had a show in Trouble down in South Carolina, and I would fly there every Monday morning. So like the flight attendants at LaGuardia knew me and they paid for my ticket and my daughter's ticket. I was like, I'm not sitting with her on my lap, and they would get her own seat. So every Monday morning we'd walk out on the tarmac at LaGuardia. I'd put her in the thing. I did that for 2 months and I'd be down there for 3 or 4 days. And then we went on the road once for 6 weeks to Missouri because I had a showrunner quit. And it was like our biggest, most expensive, most important show. So I packed her in the car and drove to Missouri and lived in a hotel room. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, but it was, and then my younger daughter came with me to the office 2 days a week for the first 2 years of her life. So I was really fortunate to have great bosses. I give them all the credit for sure.
It's incredible. I don't know really anybody else who has done that or could have pulled that off.
Well, I also had very relaxed children. There were a couple of other women who had babies and they tried to bring them and their kids just screamed all day long. So that also, my kids had a temperament that worked well. They never screamed and cried. So I wasn't ever disturbing anybody. They were like therapy for the office.
I love that.
Because people would they're like, can I just sit and play with her? I'm like, sure.
It's amazing. I love that story.
It's pretty amazing.
And then you went to HGTV from True, right?
Yeah, I took a couple of months off because I was so burned out. I had a couple of just shows that were about to put me in the grave. So I took a couple of months off and they were like, well, when are you coming back? I'm like, I'm not sure yet. Give me a month. And then month was approaching. I'm like, I need another month. And they were like, well, you're coming back though, right? I'm like, yeah, that's my plan. And then I heard about the job at HG through Terry Murray because she was working there at that point. And once I interviewed for that job,
that was it.
Yeah. Yep.
So your career has spanned more than 2 decades at this point. We won't get into the numbers. And listen, I'm a lot older than you, so we will not talk about decades, okay? But you have done so many interesting things, which brings us to sort of current day. So today, you are a mom of 5.
6.
6, sorry.
Added another
and a dog.
Family and a dog.
Right, and a dog. And you have a full-time career. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have you talk to me about what you're doing now. Yep. And you have all these personal projects going on. So this really lends itself to me saying, again, you are my superhero. I mean, how and what are you doing? So fill me in.
Well, when I left HGTV, I was going through a divorce and I had never been a stay-at-home mom. So for me, the chance to be there when my kids got home from school was a new experience for me. I only had them 50% of the time. So when I had them, I wanted to be fully present. I didn't want to be off on a shoot. I didn't want to be out pitching. I just wanted to be home so that they could come to our new house and feel comfortable. So I literally went bananas on this place and got it totally decked out and comfortable and cozy and totally done, so that the first time they saw it, it was like, okay, this is a home. This isn't like a shell of an apartment. So that was incredible and came at the perfect time. But I always was still pitching, and I was working with a couple of producers in LA, and got close on some stuff. And then my mother's father, my grandfather, was a police officer in Miami. So growing up, he was 6'5", 300 and some odd pounds. He was a monster. Very intimidating, but always super sweet to me. And I had kind of heard whispers my whole life about a secret operation that he was a part of in the city of Miami in the mid-40s. So I was like, I want to learn more about that. So I started delving into that, did a bunch of research, went to LA, pitched to 3 different producers, film producers. And the company that did the Pitch Perfect trilogy, they were completely enamored by the story. So I signed a deal with them, and we spent the next almost 2 years working on it, writing up a pitch. So we've pitched that around. COVID made it really, really difficult, but I feel like that's going to have its time. So it was definitely a labor of love and a whole new experience for me delving into the scripted world, and I absolutely loved it. Also in quarantine, I started writing a book. I had always wanted to write a book since I was a kid, and my dad would say, well, writers write. And I'm like, yeah, and I don't do that. But for some reason during COVID, it became, I'm ready to write this book that had been brewing for a while. So it's a teen novel, very heavily based on my life, and it's because it was insane. And so I've written about 45,000 words.
Wow.
So I put it down for a while because there was just too much going on with planning the wedding and a lot of other stuff, including we just took in our niece. So that is our 6th child. So I just picked it up again because my goal is to finish it by the end of the year. And then during this whole process, a producer that I had worked with extensively while at HGTV had been talking to me, I want you to come and work with me. And we were getting close, and then COVID hit, and you know how that goes. So he came to me last year and said, you're the person I want to head up my US operations, head up all the development and production. And I love him. There's not a whole lot of people that I would want to work with at this stage of the game, but I adore him, and he's so creative. He's as passionate about television as I am. There's nothing I like better than sitting down with him and just brainstorming. And he's also just he's a good human. And so I really, really enjoy him. And we're going to Real Screen out in Dana Point in early June. So that's exciting. We have some amazing, amazing projects. And yeah, I'm just trying to juggle it all. We have 6 kids, 5 schools, and none of them drive.
Boink.
Yeah. Yeah. Bane of my existence is trying to get kids from point A to point B, not leave any of them at aftercare, not forget to pick them up, not to miss, the sporting, the music, the this, the that. There's so many events.
And even though you're working from home, it's still so challenging because you're on Zoom calls all day and you're writing and you're doing so many things. I had 2 kids. I don't even know how you can even keep it together. I used to have a calendar, on a whiteboard, and I would color code their activities, and we had help, but it's challenging. And so, the fact that you work at home, could be a double-edged sword also, because the work's always there calling
about
you.
it is, I can brine my chicken for tonight's dinner while
Right.
I'm working, and I can throw in a load of laundry, and I can check and make sure my niece is doing well because she's doing virtual school until August.
Wait, and you have your own, what we call it, training, athletic. How do you refer to Visco Fit? Because I love Visco Fit.
It is a fitness program that I started. I just had my 5th anniversary, and it really just came from women that I knew saying, "What are you doing to stay in shape?" And I just created this program. They're like, "Well, where is it?" And I'm like, "It's in my computer at my house." And they're like, "Well, why don't you put it on Instagram?" And I'm like, because, when you're a behind the scenes person, you're a behind the scenes person. So they were like, "You need to put this online." And so I started doing it with just a controlled group, a closed group. And I had about 15, 20 women that started doing it with me. And then
today
ended up. Yeah. So I think, I have about, I don't know, 16,000 followers, something like that. I probably have 300 to 400 people that do it on a regular basis. I do not charge. It's something that I'm doing anyway.
But it can be found, and we'll put this in when we post.
Yes, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch. And, there was one point where, people were just like, you need to charge. And I went to a couple business conferences, and I started working on a business plan, and my heart just wasn't in it. I'm like, I look at it as, this is the way I minister to people. And this is the way I help women who, because it gets harder as you get older, your body has changed. You're busier, you have more going on, and people just hate exercising. So I'm like, and also too, like, I don't want to work out with someone who's 25 and works out for 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day and has never had kids. Like, I want to work out with somebody who's my age and who can understand sort of the challenges that go along with it. So it's not always pretty. I have kids running through. I have kids carrying garbage.
I love it.
The dog chewing my yoga mat. Like, it's not formal by any stretch.
I love that you can log in too, Shawn, and not actually get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. with it. Again, this is your superwoman thing. You're up so early in the morning and you're going at it all day. But I love the fact that I can log in to Visco Fit at any time of the day or day of the week and pick one of your videos and one of your programs and do it at home.
There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And again, it's just something that I do. I have this little community, and it's really turned into something beautiful. And I don't know how long I'll do it. I had, last week when I felt like I was dying from bronchitis, I certainly was like, is this it? Like, is 5 years long enough? But I actually really enjoy it. And I know that in some senses, I'm sort of a lifeline to people. I think during COVID, that's when a lot of people found me. And they were doing it with their kids. Their husbands were joining them. And it became like something they could do to save their sanity. If I can help anybody's sanity, if I can save anybody's sanity, that to me, like, if I can help one person have more energy or be, because it's all so connected, right? Your physical is connected to your mental, your spiritual. And I just want people to realize that when you don't fight against it and you just make it a part of your life, the benefits are so profound that just stop fighting. just do it and get it done in the morning. And then you don't have to think about it the rest of the day.
And they're great because they're short. They're 20-minute workouts, which
they're
is
anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. It depends on, like, I was just training for a half marathon. So I was keeping them down shorter and doing less of them because I was trying to do it all in the beginning. And I was like,
in your free time training for a half marathon. Okay. People, are you hearing this woman? She is a superhero.
My husband was over that. He was like, I'm so proud of you. Please don't do another one.
Till next year. No. I know you.
I don't know. That half marathon, that was the hardest race I've ever done. And especially I haven't done a half marathon in 20 plus years. So a little bit older. But it was a goal I set for myself. I'm turning 54 this summer. And I was like, I just want to see if I can do it. And I did it. It wasn't pretty. But
you made it though. You crossed that line.
It closed the course at 4 hours. I'm like, if I can get in before then. So I finished way ahead of that, but 30 minutes slower than my last half marathon time in 2000, probably 2000. But I finished and my kids got to watch me and my kids got to cheer me on and my husband, and that was really all I cared about. I wanted seeing my kids be proud of me and be like, Mom, can't believe you did that. Like, it's just the best.
What I also love about Visco Fit and just it is part of your whole storytelling lifestyle because you communicate with the people who are involved with Visco Fit, who are following you or working out with you, and you share your own story with us openly. And you've been a storyteller your whole life. Now, our podcast is Storytellers Behind the Scenes. So is it difficult to share your own personal story? Is it more difficult to tell your own story than it is to go out and do an interview or do research and tell somebody else's story?
Well, I think I have such experience in that realm. I don't have as much experience telling my own story, but at the same time, I don't try to project some perfect life. I have cried on camera, either when I'm frustrated with my kids or I start talking about my dad and I break down in tears. People have been here when I'm venting about the fact that I can't get my oldest daughter out of the house on time. And meanwhile, I'm supposed to send her off into the world. So I share because it's literally what's happening in that moment. We are just like everybody else. Like we said to our kids yesterday, guys, we're doing the best we can. And that's really my whole mode with the exercise program is you can find 1,001 reasons every single day not to take care of yourself. It's super easy. I could name 10 in 10 seconds. But when you are raising children, working, you are in either a marriage or some kind of partnership, you need energy to be the best that you can be for the people that you love. So if I don't take care of myself, I'm going to be crap for all of them. And I can tell when 2-3 days has gone by. I am definitely much more short-tempered, more easily aggravated about things. And that's not the mom I want them to have. I want them to be like, oh, when my mom's mad, you better watch out. But I don't want that to be on the regular. I want the regular to be like, yeah, my mom is fun and we have a good time. She kicks my ass sometimes and makes me, we make all of our kids do chores. We pay them an allowance. But, and I think my husband's the same way. He's the nicest person in the world, but as well as I do, sometimes kids don't listen till you raise your voice. So that was a very roundabout answer to, I don't intentionally share. It's just so much of what happens while I'm working out.
Right.
Our son set our mailbox on fire the other day.
Oh, wow.
So there is a decent chance that would have happened while I was on my workout. And then I see smoke coming and we're like, why did you put a smoke bomb in our mailbox? But that's real life. That's the stuff that happens. So it's
you've got your own reality TV show there.
We have had multiple people tell us that. Why do you not pitch yourselves? I'm like, no, thank you.
No way.
I would never do that to my kids. I don't think we're all that interesting. I just think I love our life. If you had ever told me I was going to have 6 kids, I would have told you to jump off a bridge. But I have a great partner, so I'm able to do it.
Talk to me a little bit, because this really kind of is a great segue, about perseverance and being able to shift in a moment's time for the work that we do and in life. Just what drives you every day? How do you stay engaged in everything, in every capacity that you do? And as a storyteller, how does that affect the stories that you're telling?
Well, I think I'm always drawn to people that have something just innately unique in their story. So I met these 2 young guys that run a custom car shop, and they work with their dad and his twin brother, their uncle.
Oh, that's cool.
Even though the young guys own the company and technically the dad and uncle work for them, the dynamics are such that the dad and uncle are in charge. So that kind of family dynamic and generational storytelling, I have always loved that. And I think that, listen, so much of what we try to teach our kids is you get knocked down and you get back up. Staying down is not an option. And so my kids have seen me go through some really hard times, but I hope that what they'll always say is, my mom's really strong and she never quit. And I think that was what I wanted them to see during the half marathon, because it was so hard and it was so hot and there were so many hills. I wanted them to see, I was not going to quit. It was miserable and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I didn't quit. And so I think I'm always drawn to stories where people just persevere through the highs and the lows. Life is great when it's all easy, but we have a niece who's going through some really hard times, and it's like, yeah, you got to keep moving forward, and none of this defines who you are as a human being. It's just part of your story. And we all have one. And so I just enjoy telling them. I think it took a while to get used to telling mine. And certainly it probably got me to the point that I was comfortable writing this book, because mining those memories was an experience for sure. But yeah, I think everybody has a story. That's one of the amazing things about it. And everybody's got something interesting, something unique, something special, something to share. But certainly the family stories, the generational stories, I'm always really drawn to those.
So if you were going to give a piece of advice to someone who wanted to break into this business or who wanted to change a career, because a lot of people right now, they're leaving their jobs, they want to start a new career, and maybe they've always wanted to be in our business. We meet a lot of people. I've met a lot of people who are much older PAs, production assistants, than what we normally would see, kids coming out of school or interns who are in the field. What piece of advice would you give someone who is attempting to break into this business?
Well, the amazing thing about now that's so different from when I was getting into the business and you were getting into the business is it is so incredibly easy to create content now. So you can make your mark simply by creating content and putting it up on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or wherever. So if you have a story that you want to tell, or you have content that you like, it's also really easy to reach out to people and say, I love your YouTube channel, or I love your Instagram videos. I love what you're doing. I'll come work for free. You can't do that for long, but certainly to get your foot in the door and let them see how valued you are. And that's really something I'm trying to do. My husband and I obviously we have all of our children, but then we have a lot of nieces and nephews. And so I'm hiring them as PAs to get them out into the field, get them exposed to what I do, because I've always been so fortunate. I'm so glad that I didn't listen to my dad and let him dissuade me, because I have always said, if I have to do anything in the world, I'm so glad it's television. I love it. I absolutely love it. And that's probably how I've stayed even in the midst of craziness and taking on probably more than any mental health expert would recommend. But I think if you love what you do, it does make it that much easier. So I think if you're interested or you want to be a writer, producer, get your content out there. Very easy to find. If you want scripted, very easy to find actors, very easy to find people that you know around you that you think might make great television. So I think there's so many ways, so much easier than I think it was when we were coming up.
I agree. And there's so many places to post your content that don't really cost money. I mean, you can have your own YouTube channel and I think it's free, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to spend a dime. You can post it on Instagram, and we all know that people are using their cell phones, to shoot films.
Yep.
And so I've given that advice to a lot of young people to say, if you're passionate about something, don't talk yourself out of doing it, because we all have that, imposter syndrome in our brain that says, we can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or I have no background in that. What business do I have trying to, become a writer? But there's so many people who are innately talented. That I think that's a great piece of advice. So what's next for you on the horizon? What are we going to be seeing? When is your book? You said you're going to finish your book at the end of the year. My goal is
to finish it by the end of the year. I feel like that gives me enough time, but not too little and not too much. And I actually have a friend in publishing in New York that's sort of been in it with me for a few months, and she's very passionate about the project and feels like I have something worth putting out there, which is nice to hear. And then I'm just going to keep, working at my new job. I've only been here 3 months. But I love it. I love being part of a team. I love the whole collaboration process. I love finding talent. People are like, you love the job that most people hate. Most people hate development. But I love it. I love finding people and getting excited about someone. And I think one of my gifts is being able to shape concepts, formats around people. So I'm having the time of my life. If I can get all my kids through the end of the school year without anyone having a nervous breakdown, it will be wonderful. We're going to take a nice vacation this summer, all 8 of us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, really
that'll be fun.
I can't look too far into the future because there's too much going on in the present. So,
well, I am so excited and eager to just keep watching you. And I appreciate that you share your life with the world. And it's so nice to, reconnect with you and to chat with you today. And hopefully you'll come back and chat more when your book comes out and some of these other exciting things. I can't wait to hear about your film. and watch that grow. And hopefully, as you know, I would love to be able to work with you again as well. So many of our common friends wanted me to send their love to you and say hello when I told them that we were going to be chatting today. And there's so many more stories, but we could talk about that again. But you are a real treat, and just in awe of all that you've accomplished, and really excited to keep watching you grow, even, at 5 a.m. I'm not up at 5 a.m. I watch, later in the day, but
okay.
I will be on Visco.
Whenever you get it done, whenever you get it done.
Well, you're a real inspiration to me and so many other people, Shawn. Thank you so much.
Great to connect again.
Yes. Enjoy your day. I'm sure you've got a lot going on.
I do. I have a few things. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.